That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Together, which is technically the sixth narrative feature directed by Stephen Daldry, this time co-directing with Justin Martin, which Bleecker Street will be releasing on August 27th, 2021.
Do I know this person's other films?
Yeah. I actually am a big fan of Daldry's first two films, which were Billy Elliot and The Hours.
Okay.
I both like those a lot. He also directed The Reader, which Kate Winslet won an Oscar for. Extremely loud and incredibly close. His last feature was Trash in 2014, which I remember seeing with Rooney Mara.
Okay, this film is about a couple living in the UK who are experiencing lockdown. So the film starts when the UK first goes in lockdown.
This is a COVID-19 film.
It's a COVID-19 film. Except they don't really talk about COVID-19 in the movie. And then it lasts for like a year. So through the first lockdown, another lockdown, and then right before they are to get vaccinated. And it's basically them sort of at each other's throats, like mildly. Their relationship is not... How would you describe their relationship? Like...
Dull.
But they don't seem happy together, but...
So it starts out where they are clearly... It starts on the first day of the national lockdown, so March 24th, 2020, and they are breaking the fourth wall, talking to the camera, as if it's another character in the room, a friend, or more likely that of a... It makes the audience feel like they're in the role of a therapist in this relationship, as these two are providing exposition in telling their story vaguely about how they came to be a couple. They have a preteen son, and basically they hate each other.
They say they hate each other, but their interactions seem very like... I don't know. I feel very lukewarm about this movie, just how I think they feel about their relationship. I don't know.
Well, kind of. I think we were both hoping this would be more along the lines of, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, if you will, to reference that eternal focal point. But because they almost seem to kind of get off on disliking each other. That's the pattern or the rhythm of their lives now.
Yes, but it's not that sexy. It's quite dull.
Yes.
Because they're this upper middle class couple with this kid. I'm not clear if they were married and now they're divorced or separated and rejoined. I don't know. Their relationship seems interesting.
They're also never named.
They're never named. Okay. We know that James McAvoy's... Oh, we didn't say who's in it.
Yeah, James McAvoy and Sharon Horgan.
Okay, so James McAvoy is presented initially as sort of more conservative, more preoccupied with money. It appears he runs his own business.
It's in data analytics.
Sharon's character...
Mm-hmm. She's a charity coordinator.
Oh, it's also important to know that James McAvoy's character doesn't come from money necessarily. Like, he's more working class. But Sharon's character appears initially to be more liberal and comes from more privilege. And she works...
as a charity coordinator working with refugees.
Yeah, not much happens. I mean, throughout the year we see them, they just kind of aren't getting along. They have this kid in the background lurking around who doesn't really contribute anything. We witness him. We don't witness anything. It's always in the house, but we're told that at a point he was able to go back to school, but then because of COVID has to be back in the house. We really don't get a sense of what they're doing to manage, except that James has like an asparagus garden, and Sharon's mom dies during this period, and James, it appears, loses his business, but it doesn't seem to have any financial strain on their situation, I guess.
They start becoming sexual again following the day of the mother's funeral. All of that, of course, which happens off screen, because we are contained within this house.
Yeah. Well, really just like the living room and kitchen.
Yes.
Or mainly the kitchen and like breakfast nook. It's very contained. I don't know. There's not much to the story at all. And I was quite bored. The film starts out, it was jarring to me because they're speaking directly to the audience, and it felt like I was in like a community theater play. it's like they're performing their relationship,
Yeah,
and it didn't feel authentic at all.
It's kind of double performance. It's like a double layer of performance, because here we have these actors that are performing as a couple that are characters performing for, ostensibly like a live theater audience almost, and it really kind of takes you out of the immediacy of their emotional issues. And I think it's whenever the film very infrequently turns away from that, using that as a device, where it becomes poignant.
The first indication we get of James' character's personality is he relays a story to the audience of being at the grocery store and having to buy aubergines, which are eggplants if you don't know, because I didn't. Because their son will only eat these because he seems picky.
Which we end up learning that he doesn't even like aubergine.
Yeah.
Aubergine parmigiana.
I know aubergine is a color that is the color of eggplant, so I should have known that he was talking about eggplants. Well, I did know that, actually.
It just makes the dish sound off.
Anyway, James relays the story of being at the grocery store, wanting some eggplants, 3 of them, and the clerk explained to him, like, I can't sell you any, but why not? I see a big crate of them over there. Well, because the person who handled them last tested positive for COVID, so we don't want anyone to get sick. And James offers her £1,000 for 3 eggplants. And she says, I would love to take this money from you, but I wouldn't feel right.
What kind of a person would I be?
What kind of person would I be?
If you got sick.
Like if you got sick. And then he rails into her. Like, this is the problem with you people. You don't know how to take an opportunity when you see it. And the wife is hearing him tell the story to us. And she's like, you're despicable. I thought that was such an over-the-top way to relay his personality. And there are other examples, but honestly, I don't even feel like going through them, because I just think, like, the thing I like least about this film is, A, why do we care about these people? Their relationship seems dull, and like you said, maybe if it would have been more heated and sexy, like a Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, then there would have been that factor to it that would have made it so much more enjoyable. But as it is, it's just like 2 people who are in a relationship who don't seem to really like each other.
Well, it's kind of...
But they're bound by this kid, and they're stuck because of COVID, and there's just sort of... I mean, I hate to say nasty and awful to each other, because it doesn't read as that fun.
I agree. They are kind of as bland and banal as the title itself is. In fact, there are lines in the dialogue that I would have, I think, made better titles for this, like the love that exists between hate or beyond hate, and I sort of love you. Is it enough? Like,
I have a note that the boy, who really has nothing to do except in the end, he says, I don't like eggplant or aubergine. But I have a note saying that he's sitting in the background looking like Eon Flux. Because he has this, like, he's an interesting looking kid with this weird haircut.
Well, he's kind of ignored by them because they're so self-consumed, which also somewhat makes them unlikable. I think both actors, I think McAvoy and Horgan, do a really good job, considering, these large chunks of dialogue that they have to get through, often in a single shot.
In particular, Sharon has a scene where she is talking about, because her mother dies, and she starts off by saying, my mother was killed. And then she talks about
exponential
growth, and it's a very sort of elaborate display of that concept, and how, which I thought was interesting initially, but then she delves into, like, we should have acted sooner, and because of that, my mom ended up being transferred from the ICU to, like, a convalescence hospice or whatever, and then that's where ultimately she got really sick. And I don't know, it just feels very, like, self-indulgent and selfish, like, not only this film, but the characters in it.
I agree. I think as a time capsule, it's interesting in the very specific things it's referencing in a certain time and place. And it's almost like, I wish they did kick this can ahead 5 years, because maybe I'd feel a little kinder towards it.
Because we're not even out of the clear by any means relating to COVID. So to have this film take place, it just feels very, like, incomplete.
Yes. I think the best scene is when it's finally where they aren't talking directly to us, where she's come home from basically watching her mother die via a phone, but even though she'd been allowed to visit with her, and kind of the reality sets in of what we've kind of lived through and had to go through, and the precautions we've had to take, and how terrible that feels. And that's really the only moment of poignancy I felt for it. I think the film also tends to focus on him because we have James McAvoy who gets two kind of sequences alone with the audience while she doesn't. And the second of those I thought was terrible because that's where we loop back to that sequence about the aubergines where he witnesses somebody being terrible to
the lady he was terrible to in the beginning.
But he doesn't realize it because the mask at first and kind of the epiphany that he has about himself and his behavior. But it's all very...
That seemed contrived.
Yes.
Then I don't know if this is the first scene you're referring to, but he talks about the nurse, like the male nurse who's caring for... Jonathan, who's caring for Sharon's mom. Mm-hmm. And that character, James relaying like this story also felt very contrived.
Yes.
Because he keeps saying like how great Jonathan is. He's such a great nurse and all the work he's doing. Like, who are you? I have another note, like they're talking to the audience like we're their friend, but I don't care about these people. You're not my friend.
Well,
like,
their friend or their therapist. It's like, I could really be done with listening to you.
Yeah.
But they're also, so there's a device of exposition in the beginning where they talk about how it's because of the mushrooms that we are stuck together because they had gone on this like mushroom hunting.
Oh, that's right.
Class or whatever, learning how to gather the right kinds of mushrooms and how the poisonous ones really look the same. And they don't know who did it, but somehow they had picked some poisonous mushrooms. And
they both claim that they picked the poisonous mushroom on purpose to make the other sick.
He got sick. He got sick and felt like he was near death. And then it comes back down to the revelation that she picked it on purpose because she wanted to hurt him. And then his revelation is that I know that you did that.
Like I wanted to.
Yes, which is very almost like Phantom Thread with Daniel Day-Lewis and Vicky Creeps.
Another turning point, which is towards the end, when James relays how he's so frustrated that his wife is cutting in line to get the vaccine. And then she comes home and says, I thought about you and felt guilty and I didn't do it. And it's like, okay. I think, well, we mentioned, so ultimately I feel like this is such a weird story because the hatred these two have doesn't amount to anything that would be sort of comedic or camp or enjoyable in any way. And if it's a love story, it is weak.
And then it's trying to be so earnest about kind of the current time we're living.
Okay, but then yes, but then it doesn't talk. But then if it's going to be earnest about the lockdown and COVID, we don't hear anything from these characters about how they feel about COVID. Are they scared? Do they think it's real? Like how most of us who have experienced this, what I thought this was going to be was how their thoughts and beliefs about COVID change from. And their fears, just how like we were so afraid back in March 2020, and then as time has gone on, it's just like wow.
Well, yeah, because the aubergine instance in particular, it's like, well, that makes sense because that's what we were
back then. Yeah,
back then because we didn't know people were washing their mail and washing all their groceries and washing their packages because we didn't quite know how it was spread and if people were being extra cautious. And here's this person who's throwing caution to the wind.
But these characters don't talk at all about COVID. Like, we don't know if they're afraid. We don't know if, like, are they venturing out? We do hear that when things were not on lockdown, that they had ventured out to, like, go to a restaurant or something. But we really don't know what they think about COVID. So my last note is I would have preferred this movie be a story about that damn grocery store clerk. Mm-hmm. And, like, what do people like that, how did they feel during this lockdown when they still had to go to work and everyone's afraid of this thing? But instead we get these upper middle class white people
and maybe that's the point of it, that trip right into that cliche of him saying that he told her that she's a hero, and it's like, well, this hero has to work 8 to 5 or whatever. It was written by Dennis Kelly, who wrote that television series The Third Day, which I think I only watched the first 2 episodes of with Jude Law. He also wrote a Jude Law film directed by Kevin McDonald called Black Sea. And I think, this film kind of misses the mark, especially in the sense that this is coming after Doug Liman's Locked Down with Anne Hathaway and Chiwetel Ejiofor, which arguably also had its problems, but I liked that film a lot more, and I think that film is, strangely doing a lot more in the current setting.
What would you give this film?
2 out of 5.
I would give it 2 out of 5 as well. Thank you.